So we'll talk about why that is. So again, a lot of people, when you think of estate planning or wills, you think of death. It's negative. It's like a taboo subject you don't want to talk about. Other people don't want to talk about. Who wants to talk about funerals and death and end of life and all these things, right? It's got these negative connotations. But what I want you to start thinking is what we're going to talk about is it's freeing, just like getting out of debt. It's peace of mind by having something in place, because um, if we don't, there's some consequences. And a lot of times, again, coming back to the future self that we talked about a couple times ago, we think we'll do it in the future. Right now, we're healthy, we're fine, nothing's going to happen to us. We'll deal with that. Well, we're going to talk about some horror stories of why that might not be good. So before we talk about this, let's look at a second survey. Okay, take another 10 seconds. Okay. So as you can see, most thought that as long as you discuss it with family members of who you want to raise your children and where the children should go, that's false. That you have to do something else. A couple of you said that's true. You're somewhat split. 1/3 said true, that you can do a holographic will, which is writing it in your own handwriting and signing it, and that would work. And 2/3 of you said false. It depends on the state. And in New Mexico, a holographic will, again, in your own handwriting and signing that, as well as an audio or video will where you give your intentions, is not valid. So that would not work in New Mexico. Other states allow for holographic wills, but if you did that and thought you were good, that doesn't count if you're in New Mexico. So you might want to think about that for the future. Joyce said estate planning, she sees it associated with large estates, right? So if you don't have much, you don't need one, right? Diana says she thinks of her survivors, which is key. Who will care for young children? Definitely. Personal property cause many fights, yeah. So a lot of people think, and many maybe here, because if you don't have one, then what in reality what you're saying is, what's the big deal, right? Wills can be expensive, or estate planning can be expensive. If nothing happens, it goes to probate, and states have rules to kind of handle those things, right? I mean, they're going to split it between family members, everything will be fine. While that's true that the state does have rules, there can be serious consequences to not putting an estate plan in place. And so you can see here that having a legal will or trust kind of bridges that gap to give your home, your car, your possessions, your children, your heirs, etc., who's going to raise them, without having a will, which is called dying intestate, without a will. Then you just don't know what's going to happen with those. And so I'm going to share a couple of horror stories. Sometimes that wakes us up. Some of us are motivated by positive things of what it can do for us, and others are motivated by fear. So let's read a couple of stories here. So Ken was a 75-year-old widower He had told several persons that he wished to leave his estate to his cousin and to an elderly neighbor with whom he enjoyed hours of companionship, but he made no written will. Eventually, the cousin received 1/3 of his estate, and the balance went to relatives who lived far away and he had never known. His neighbor received nothing. Okay, so he wanted his possessions and property to go a certain place, and that did not happen because he had no will. Another one with minor children. Tim Smith was killed in a snowmobile accident in January. His wife, Mary, was killed in a car accident the following April. They had verbally asked a brother and his wife to raise their 2-year-old daughter, Tara, but they didn't write a will. Now Mary's parents want custody of Tara as well. The case is in court. Okay, one of the main reasons we need a will, especially if you have minor children, is to declare a guardian. If you don't declare a guardian, lots of people in your family might want to raise your child or think they can do a better job. And because of that, there's going to be fighting and arguing and conflict, and that's not what you want to leave, and that's not something that people want to experience when they're supposed to be mourning your loss and wanting the best for your children. So definitely, if you have any minor children and don't have a will, that is a big, scary disservice that you're doing to them. You definitely need that in there. Otherwise, conflict, rage, and fights will happen. All right. Let's look at another one here. So Marion has a favorite charity and close personal friend that she wishes to share in her estate. She must make a written will. The New Mexico law provides for the distribution of her estate only to her relatives. She hasn't seen her nieces and nephews in 15 years, yet they would get it all. So again, somebody that doesn't have it. A factor often overlooked is that without a will, a person cannot state when the heirs shall receive their inheritance. For example, Nathan, 18, fell heir to a large sum of money and blew it within a year. With a will, his father could have provided in a testamentary trust that a percentage of his estate passed to Nathan at different ages, maybe some at age 21, some more at age 25, and the remainder at age 30. This would have allowed time for Nathan to mature and gain wiser financial judgment. You definitely want to ask if money getting passed on is going to be a blessing or a curse. And if you don't state when and who and how much, then as soon as even if you have a will and it says it goes to these children, well, as soon as they get 18, they get it all. And that could be a curse rather than a blessing. The last one, and maybe you can think of if stories that you've heard of or known of with estate planning, is by George. It says, I have a friend whose father had remarried years after his first wife had passed away. The father had just retired when he suddenly required hospitalization. A week later, he died. He had no will, and at the time in Massachusetts, where he lived, the default was that the current spouse got everything. The children were left with nothing. The new widow was nervous about having sufficient assets for the rest of her life and so would not disclaim any of the inheritance. As a result, the widow and the children didn't speak to each other for years. So hopefully this is not what you want to pass on, or you don't want your parents to pass on to you and your siblings, though they may not want to discuss and talk about wills and estate planning. It isn't just for the dead or for when they die, but it's the people that die. It's for the people that are still living, right? It's that you want peace and harmony, not conflict all over the place. So I'm sure you guys have horror stories as well. But let's look at these questions. If you were to die tomorrow, who would get my property? Who would care for my minor children? Or parents that are in need of help? What happened to my spouse? If you have a family business, would that continue? Will the estate be settled properly? What about taxes, fees, etc.? And so if you want any input about who raises your minor children or who gets any of your treasured possessions, what they receive and when they receive it, you need a will. It's just plain and simple. If you don't have it, then the state decides. You don't want the state deciding. So what is estate planning? Estate planning is the process of determining the distribution of your assets upon your death, and it also covers the management of your personal affairs in the event of incapacity, which would be with the power of attorney. So, in other words, if you have a will, you give what you have to whom you want, when you want, and the way you want. You also do it at the lowest possible cost. There's administrative costs, taxes, etc. So the lowest possible tax to yourself and loved ones. And you have instructions left to make medical and financial decisions if you're unable to do so, which we'll talk about. Because family members, when they're under stress, don't always make the best decisions for medical decisions or financial decisions for you. And so when you're able to and have a good mind and sound mind to be able to make those decisions, you should be making those in conjunction with your family members of what your desires are and what they want, so that they're not making these decisions during a stressful time in their life. Let's do another survey. I take another 10 seconds. Yes, personal property does cause many families to fight. I agree. All right, so hopefully you can see this survey. Most of you believe that I have a will but prefer not to let others know what is in my will. They'll find out once I die. You don't think that's a good strategy. We'll talk about that. I agree with you. So those of you who said that's true, feel free to share your thoughts as we go through this, but communication is key. Every member of the family, especially children, should get an equal amount. Some of you think that's true. Most of you think that's false. All right, so let's go back to this. And this is what many families, even though you think your family has communication skills, turn out to be. And you can see poor grandma over here, or mom, looking down at her children, fighting and arguing and yelling and disputing and not talking to each other and having hurt feelings and all these things because, right, they didn't talk about it when they were alive. I was in Arizona for Easter weekend, and my father-in-law is a state attorney. And I asked him some questions in preparation for today in this presentation. And we got into, just his thoughts about communication and communicating with family and talking about it when you're alive, and make, that limits the amount of conflict and arguing later. And he's one that avoids conflict, and so he doesn't do that. I said, so you're okay with just waiting until you pass on, and then it's a surprise what's in the will? And he said, yep, I won't be there anymore. And I said, but do you want to pass on to your children this possibility, highly likely possibility, that they're going to argue and fight over things rather than having a discussion? And maybe it's a heated discussion while you're alive, but at least people can understand and ask questions and get on the same page, so it's not a surprise. So some people, a couple of you from the survey, thought that that was a good strategy. I do not think that's a good strategy. I think that's a horrible strategy. I think we definitely need to talk. And so, in the end, an up-to-date will can save your loved ones a lot of time and trouble, and it shouldn't be left to someone else to decide how an estate is divided. So a plea is to be nice to your survivors, right? Don't go putting them in difficult situation because you put off something that you should have done a long time ago, which is at least have a will. What is the legacy that you want to leave? It's definitely not arguing and fighting over possessions. Definitely not having your family being torn apart because of stuff. And so not also at this point, I want to just say similarly, not having life insurance. This isn't about life insurance, but life insurance is part of estate planning. Not having life insurance can possibly leave your family in a dire financial situation that leads to the stress of losing you, or adds to the stress. Not having life insurance, especially if you have minor children, is a very selfish thing. So I strongly suggest that you have a 15 to 20-year term life insurance policy at 8 to 10 times your annual gross income. There's lots of horror stories as well with life insurance that people don't have life insurance or adequate life insurance, and it puts the family, especially with minor children, in a difficult situation and struggling for years and years. And so it's cheap, it's essential, and everyone should have it, especially if you have debts or things that need to be paid off, but definitely if you have minor children. If you do not have a will and you do not have life insurance, I'm telling you that that's a selfish thing. So you guys should definitely get those. All right. So peace of mind comes from having a will and having adequate life insurance. It just does. I mean, think about it. If someone dies and you know that in your will you've said who you want to raise your children, you said who you want to have your possessions, how, when, who gets the life insurance, that your family is taken care of. I mean, that is peace. Hoping it goes away or thinking you're not going to die is foolish, and that doesn't work. Any thoughts about that? Yeah, yeah. Brenda says even with the will and prior discussions, there's arguments, right? So think it'd be expounded without a will and prior discussions. I mean, it doesn't mean that having a will and having prior discussions eliminates arguing and fighting if there's disagreement. But boy, it's much, much better than if there was no will and no prior discussions. Yeah, so Isabel, get a will, because if you don't have a will, uh, people will fight about raising your kids. All right, so there should be no family secrets in estate planning or succession planning. Everyone should know what's going on. It doesn't make any sense that you just surprise people. Now, you can keep a few things hidden if you have certain items that you want to, give. But again, if it's your favorite ring or your wedding ring and you have 3 daughters, or if it's certain jewelry, or if it's certain possessions, and then it just comes out, they're still going to be arguing about that. So you might as well have discussions about, look, what do you care about most? What's important to you? How can we equitably kind of divide this up, and what would you want, and what does that mean? And have those discussions while you're alive, rather than in secret. So coming together and reading the will, not knowing what's in there until you hear it for the first time from the executor, is an outdated concept. It just doesn't work that way. You want to communicate, right? This heads off conflict, hard feelings. Even communicating, there's still hard feelings, but it definitely minimizes those. If there's technical details, and while you're communicating, involve a lawyer, including the details of the distribution of your different property. So all may not agree, but again, it's better to share and explain your rationale. It provides then everyone this opportunity to discuss, to understand and respect your decisions, or have this discussion. It allows hurt feelings to heal, jealousy to diminish, especially it's pronounced if they have no clue and this is sprung on them just after a person dies. And then if someone dies and doesn't have life insurance and they're minor children, that causes a whole other thing. If there's no will and no life insurance, and then people are dying and you're supposed to be mourning, I mean, what a nightmare to put family through. Don't do that. Have peace of mind. All right, so how should we divide things out? I have 5 children. I'm married with 5 children. What if my wife and I both die? Should I divide equally among the 5 children and put down in my will that they each get a fifth of the of the estate, and I can put down who raises them, etc., and that they each get 20%, and when they get that money, what is it? Well, I'm saying that just as we raise our children, it's not exactly the same. The children need different things, that we need to focus on what's fair, not necessarily equal. And so here's a picture of what's more fair, right? Equitable. People like different things, different pieces of pie. It doesn't have to be exactly the same thing for everybody, exactly equal. That is not what fair means. And so we need to think about what is fair. So let's say, oh, did I miss one? Yeah, here we go. How many of you had kids that needed braces? So far, I've only had one of the 5, of course. I only have 2 teenagers, so more might need it. But what did you do for the kids that did need braces? Did you go out and spend $2,000 on them, or 2,500, or 4,000, or however much those cost, depending if you have insurance or not? Probably not, right? The kids needed braces, and the other kids didn't. So you didn't get those kids braces, and you got the kids that needed braces. And so that's not exactly equal, but it is fair. It doesn't have to be equal. Any thoughts about equal and fairness? You can think of other situations that kids need different things. What about if, as they grew up, somebody was a bookworm and was just reading a lot, and the other person was really involved in sports, and they traveled, and they went to these competitions, and you took them to Europe, to participate, and you spent a lot of money on them. Does that mean that the other person should now get the same amount of money that they spent before, or they should be equal, even though growing up this other sibling got more money? You need to think through these things and have discussions and communicate so that everybody understands the reasoning. Because if somebody comes out and there's 2 kids and one gets 70% and one gets 30%, they're not going to be very happy with that. But if the 30% kid is well off and doesn't need it and had a lot growing up and went to college, and the other person didn't go to college and is in more financial need and help and things, you want to have those discussions, not just give them 50-50 necessarily. Also, if you have minor children, thinking of life insurance or money in the estate, kids are going to continue to need different things. And so rather than just split it 20%, if you just say that in the will, then a lot of times the person raising the children don't have the money to treat the children differently, and it's just sitting there for when they turn 18 and they get it. And so you need to think about who you want to have power over the money if you were to die and you leave minor children, and if it's the person raising your children or if it's somebody else, that as they are growing and needing different things, those funds can be used in different ways based on the best needs of the child rather than just equal split when they turn 18. All right. So 63% of people do not have a will at all, and another 9% have a will that is out of date, according to a Google consumer survey by U.S. Legal Wills. So it's not just young people without a lot of assets, right? It's among seniors. Those at 65 and older, only half have an up-to-date will in place. So it's not, you can't just have a will, but you also have to have an up-to-date will. And what are some things you guys think that why would you need to, or what life events would happen that you'd need to update or change your will? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Say you have a will and you got one 5 years ago or 10 years ago. What types of things would happen that you would need to update or change or get something else with your will? Death of a spouse, financial circumstances, Kids growing up. Yeah. Brenda, we'll talk about seniors without much concern about the expense of a lawyer. It's a lot more expensive not to have a will. And we'll talk about, again, you can get one like I showed at the beginning for $39. Medical needs, remarrying, help. Okay, good. So definitely marriage or remarriage or divorce, you'd want that, right? A birth of another child, death of a beneficiary, if you have somebody that's a beneficiary, definitely need to change it. Or if you want to change the beneficiaries, you would need to update it. One thing that people don't think of is if you move to another state. So I was in North Carolina, I had a will, and now I'm in New Mexico. I need to change it because there's different laws for New Mexico. If you get more property or titles of property, etc., change, then you need to update your will. So, all right. So we're just talking about this. Brenda was saying why people avoid getting an estate plan. The cost, right? Either the real cost or perceived. They think it's really expensive and they can't go and get that done, especially if you're on a fixed income or don't have that much and you're trying to think about other things. Thinking your estate's too small. Somebody at the beginning said it's only for people with large estates, right? Fear of dying. If I make a will, I'll jinx myself and die sooner, right? So some of these is fear or reasons. We're uncertain. We're not sure who to name in the legal documents. We don't know who we want things to go through to yet, or we haven't decided who we want to raise our children, minor children. We don't know who to go to. Are there other reasons you guys can think of besides these here of avoiding getting a will? Yeah, again, thinking that you're young and healthy or not going to die, right? Okay, rural areas, there's not as many services. Costs. All right, good. So we need to decide to stop procrastinating ourselves. Again, these are experiential webinars, hopefully with homework. We want to learn about the importance of these things of credit, saving, of debt, of estate planning, and then we want to take action so that we can see that kind of debunk some of these myths or fears that it costs too much or that it's hard or you can't do it or you're young and healthy or whatever, so that as you experience it and you have more peace of mind by having an estate plan, having a will, then that's easier for you to share with others and help them overcome those things, because it's much, much more expensive, much more headache, much more arguments, lots and lots of no peace of mind without one. And compared to that, it's very easy and very cheap to get these things in place. All right, so one more survey, one more question. Okay, 5 more seconds. So again, about a third, 2/3. This may be something that we're not sure of what probate is and what that means, and so let's discuss that. As long as I have a will, I will avoid the costs of probate. Okay, so that's going to be false. So a will versus, say, a revocable living trust. There's wills and trusts, and we're not getting into trusts during this webinar, but a will just like we've been saying, allows you to determine who gets what, when they get it, how much they get, who raises your minor children, etc. And so you get to decide instead of the state deciding. But it doesn't necessarily avoid probate, and probate is that your estate goes to the court system, and the court uh, puts things in place and makes sure that your debts are paid off and other expenses are paid off, court expenses and things like that. And then make sure the executor is okay to take care of it, which you've named in your will, and then they go and carry out the will. But it still goes to the court system through probate and is not held private, but is public because it's going through the court system. So your property goes through probate to your heirs. With a living trust or having a trust, your property's in the living trust. There is no probate. It's not public. It's private, and it goes to your heirs as you decide as well. And so a living trust is a better way. Within the living trust, you have a will, or within a will, you can have a trust. But having a will is key, and that's what we're focusing on. And having life insurance is key, which is another thing we want to make sure we have. And so let's talk about what you can do if you only have a will and you don't want to do the expense of having a trust. So you have your gross estate, and then your property that's titled in your name goes through the probate according to your will, is distributed. But on the left side over here, that's the right side. The left side, these are things that don't go through probate. So if you have any jointly owned property, right? So if you jointly own a home or other real estate with a spouse or someone else, then it just goes to that joint ownership. It doesn't have to go through probate. If you die, then it goes to them. Life insurance, right? Whoever you decide is the beneficiary, as well as IRAs, retirement, 401ks, etc., annuities, those things go to whoever the beneficiary is. So you want to make sure that you've named those beneficiaries. So if you have life insurance, if you don't get it, if you have it, and when you get it, make sure you put who the beneficiaries are, and more than one person in case they die. So life insurance proceedings, anything with joint tenancy, those things in the IRAs. Other things are, say, payable on death or transfer on death, which would be like life insurance, right? Or a deed or a title. So on the deed or title, if you are joint tenancy, then transfers on death. All of those things avoid probate. And so if you can have as much as you can over there on those non-probate transfers, and have that it just says this contract that if you die, it goes to this person, then those things will avoid probate. And so that's one way. Another thing is to get a power of attorney, because if you don't, if you can't make your own decisions, you become incapacitated, something happens, then you need a power of attorney. And what a power of attorney is just that they can make decisions for you, somebody that you trust, obviously, and talk about what your desires are, that they can make those decisions. I have one of these when my wife and I go abroad. I do study abroad, and when we both go to, say, Australia or somewhere for 2 weeks, okay, if both of us died or if both of us are over there and something needs to happen and we can't do it because we're in Australia, our person that's the power of attorney, they can act in our name on our behalf because they have a power of attorney. And so it's even it's good for those when you're alive. This isn't just for when you're dead. So if you're incapacitated, then you need to have somebody to be able to handle those. Now, we talked about this, right? Isn't the 80 the new 40? I'm not going to die. We're healthy, blah, 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 and that's why we don't have it. Well, after 65, chances of becoming incapacitated and needing someone like the power of attorney go up 5%. At age 80, goes up to 75%, and in any year, at any age, your chance of becoming incapacitated is greater than your chance of dying. So you have more chance of becoming incapacitated than dying. And that, for that reason, part of an estate plan is having a power of attorney, which again is part of this package that someone gets. They get a will, last will, a living will, and a power of attorney. Those three things. So there's different powers of attorney, right? You can do it for business and financial purposes. This allows them to act in your place for businesses or financial matters. It says that you can pay bills, file income taxes, sell assets, collect money, all these different things. So you want to make sure that someone you trust, but they cannot make healthcare decisions if you just have a business financial power of attorney. If you want them to make those medical, then you need a living will. So a living will allows you to specify whether or not to be kept on artificial life support. You can say if you do want to be resuscitated or not, the DNR, do not resuscitate order. It guides choices for doctors and caregivers when someone's seriously injured or near end of life, avoids unnecessary suffering by the patient. It relieves caregivers, right, of decision-making burdens. A lot of times they think into themselves that I don't love this person unless I do everything absolutely possible and make us bankrupt to make sure that they live. And that's not what the person wants. If they're not going to have the quality of life, et cetera, they don't want to put that burden on the family. They don't want to live like that. And so having a living will relieves caregivers of that decision-making burden, and a lot of times financial ruin because that's what people will do. It allows you to specify whether or not to be kept on artificial life support. So another part of your estate plan is a living will, and these are simple to do and cheap. So a will, you want life insurance, you want a power of attorney, and you want a living will. Here's some cost on Walmart. Didn't know if you knew this, but you can buy your own casket on Walmart. So things cost and they're expensive, and you kind of deciding what you want to have and how you want to be buried or cremated or those kind of things. That's part of having a discussion with your family members, because if you don't, they don't know what you want necessarily, and they will then buy the most expensive casket because you deserve it, right? And they don't want to put you in a pine box. My dad says, just get some pine and build a box and stick them in it, something that costs $100. But so it's again a stressful and emotional time. So you make your plans and decisions before you die. You want to know your funeral plans. You don't have to go that far if you don't want, but at least you have some ideas. You want to let people know. Organize your important docs and where they are. Let someone know who gets what with a will, your medical treatment, your living will, how to pay for your funeral and life expenses, your life insurance, right? In other words, be loving to your heirs and family. Have a plan. And part of that then can be in your letter of last instruction, which isn't legally binding, but it gives information, right? It could talk about your funeral preferences, talk about communicating to people upon your death that you want them to know, location and information about bank accounts and safe deposit boxes and real estate owned and assets, etc. And then again, obviously a will, etc., that will dispose of your different effects. Yeah, there's lots of expenses for funeral, right? The reception, where you're going to hold it. I mean, lots of different things. And so even if you're a single person and have debt, if you die and have funeral expenses, you should have some life insurance on yourself so that it's not a burden to your family, that they can take care of your wishes and do a good funeral for you according to your wishes and pay off your debts, etc. And that's if you're single, not married, no children, because it's still an expense. So what about, then there's digital assets as well as keeping your records. And so a lot of information is stored electronically. It provides access to financial assets, needs usernames and passwords or PINs. And so some resources down here and on our resource page, University of Idaho has a good one that goes through and you put down names of insurances that you have and your financial and your doctors that you use and all these different things. Digital assets. And so you can get on there, and my wife and I use this, and you can input it. And so she's aware. It's good communication for spouses as well, or family members. She knows everything we have. I know everything we have. We know what insurance is for the cars or the home, if we have different things, or for investment properties. Everything's there, and it's locked up. I mean, you have to make sure that it's password protected, et cetera, so someone doesn't get hold of that. But you want to have those types of things. Anybody have any thoughts about organizing their important documents, either digitally or in a kind of a folder that's in a lockbox or something like that? That's key. If you die and no one knows where your stuff is or what you have, that's going to be a nightmare for people to try to figure out, right? Especially if you don't have a power of attorney. All right, so key takeaways. Estate planning is not just for the wealthy, right? Even simple estates need plans. There is no magic number. Now, if your estate is under, say, $50,000, then it usually can avoid probate and not go through the system. But you still need a will to be able to tell people what you want to have happen, etc. Incapacity can strike at any time. However old you are, it could be a teenager, it could be 60, it could be 40, doesn't matter. Failing to plan means court will appoint a guardian and distribute your possessions as they deem fit rather than as you want. Having a healthcare power of attorney and a durable power of attorney designate an agent to act on your behalf. Those are key. Wills must be properly signed and witnessed. Again, you can't have a holographic will in New Mexico. So you need to either hire an attorney, which is going to probably be between $300 to $500 for a will, or you can do what I'm going to suggest that you do that's as cheap as $29 and get a will based on the state laws through a couple of these online programs so that you can have that. And then you need to go to someone that, what's it called, when you go to the bank and they stamp it, they're, what am I trying to think of? So notarized, thank you. You go to a notary and you also need two witnesses. And so you take two witnesses that aren't beneficiaries or related to you, and you sign, they sign, and it's notarized. And then that's what you need. So based on your state law, your wishes, notarized with at least two witnesses. Review your power of attorney designees and discuss your wishes with them. Never surprise people with key roles, right? If you want somebody to take care of your minor children, that might be something you want to talk to them about and ask them if they're willing to do and what that would entail, right? I've had people ask my wife and I, not because of me, but because of my wife, but that if we would take care of their children if they died. And my rule is if you trust me enough to take care of your children, that and you don't want that, then you care about them enough to want good things for them, that they have to have life insurance policy, and then that we have to be the ones that gets that on the behalf of the good, of the children. They can put in their will how they want it spent, but I need access. I don't want to have to be going and working with some other person that doesn't think that this kid needs braces or whatever. If you trust me with your kids, then you need to trust me with your money. And if you're not willing to do that, then you need to find somebody else. That's just me. So, person that I have that to take care of our children, I have the same thing. That if my wife and I both died, then they would get also the assets of my life insurance as well as the children. So don't surprise people. And if people ask you, ask questions. I mean, think about it. There's a lot of things. Even if it's not raising children, you're the executor of the will. There's lots of things that you have to do to execute that will, and you should be compensated for that. And so somebody in there said that their sister's the executor and they get a little bit more money. Well, they should, because it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. A couple other key takeaways: communicate before you die, right, with loved ones. Prepare a letter of last instruction and digital asset inventory so that people know where to find things, and instead of spending months and months as an investigator trying to track everything down. Think carefully about choosing an executor. Take necessary, or yourself, like I said, performing executor duties. Try to avoid probate if possible. Again, a trust is best, really, but that usually costs more like $1,400-$1,500 up to $2,500. Where a will is, you can get that does most of what you need. If you have a will, a power of attorney, and a living will, those are key. That's only $39, so everybody can do that. Think about family dynamics. If you have special needs, if there's blended families, what that means. And again, that gets really messy if you die without a will and it goes to the courts, because people that you wanted to have whether it's with your original children or stepchildren or kid to have with special needs more. That doesn't happen in the court system. So have a storage plan with your documents, and do not die without a will. So remember, this is just trying to put it in your brain, right? Nail in your brain. Everyone needs a will. Everyone needs life insurance. You need to communicate about your estate. You need to have a living will. Organize your estate and share where you're important and help others experience savoring, flow, and service. No one will force you to plan your estate. If you wish, you can do nothing. However, by not completing an estate plan, at least a will, you allow others to make the decisions for you rather than you being in charge. All right, homework. Does anybody have any questions before we get to homework? Yeah, headstone's expensive too, that's for sure. All right, so my homework for you, you can create a will for $24.95. This is at uslegalforms.com/Dave. He has a couple things. So anybody, as we're saying, people think it's expensive. Okay, you can get a will that is based on New Mexico law, focused on the state of New Mexico, that you can put in who you want to receive what, who would raise your children, what, how much they get, when they get it, all of those things that are key for $25. No one can tell me that somebody doesn't have $25 to get a will. That's not too expensive. If you want a will, a living will, and a power of attorney, plus the free ebook, that costs $39. Okay, that's what I would suggest. It's $40 to have a living will, and a power of attorney. And so your homework is to create a will, or also add living will and power of attorney through, there's lots of different places. LegalZoom, they're more expensive though. Nolo has some products, they're more expensive. US Legal Forms is great, and Dave doesn't endorse stuff, Dave Ramsey, unless he's looked at it. And so because it's $25.39 instead of like $69 plus at these other places, I suggest you go to US Legal Forms and create a will, a living will, and a power of attorney. Go get some term life insurance. Look at SelectQuote, or there's other places you can look, but you can get online and put in your age and how much you want and kind of compare 10-year, 15-year, 20-year term life insurance policy, 100,000, 250,000, 500,000, and see what the difference costs are of those amounts at 10, 15, and 20-year term life policies, and get something. I have 750,000 on myself and 500,000 on my wife, and I pay like 360 or 380 a year on me, and 280 or 310 or something for my wife a year, right? To have the peace of mind that if something happened to me, that they wouldn't be left destitute. So it's key to have these items. So you don't have to do these, of course, but strongly encourage you to do that for your homework. And the last couple things on homework: be organized with your documents. Go to either one of these. I use the top one. The University of Idaho extension has this. And put in all of your information so that, and let people know where it is, so that if something happens to you, it's all right there. What peace of mind for you and for other people to know what you have, and that people know where it is. And then finally, extra credit, right? Create a plan and communicate it with your family or those that are included in your estate plan. Make your wishes known. Share that. Communicate about it. Yeah, there's going to be probably arguments or some other things, but that's better to talk about it now than wait for later. The resources are basically those same things. So questions or significant things you learned today. Let's see if anybody has any questions about, did I debunk some of the myths? It's not just for old people. It's not going to jinx you and make you die. It's not super expensive. All of these things, but there's nightmare stories, right? There's horrible stories of what happens to families when there's no will, when there's no life insurance, when there's no living will, when they have to look for months tracking down your assets when you could have just organized those things yourself. Very easy things to do that don't take a lot of money, take some time, but really, really bring peace of mind for you and your family members. I really encourage you to do this. Who I have coverage with. So I went on Select Quote, and they gave me. I went with like the top AAA plus whatever. I'm a non-smoker, blah blah blah, not overweight and stuff. But they give you different quotes on Select Quote. Again, there's other places that I don't get any money for you going to Select Quote, but that's what I used. And they give you different ratings. And so I had West Coast Life, but now I have I can't remember the name because I got it. But I had West Coast Life. I had a 20-year term, and then it had been about 5 years, and I got on and did it again because you always want to compare, right? Insurances, whether it's auto or home or life, and so I got on and did another quote at a 15-year, and I went from 500,000 20-year term up to a 750,000 15-year term, and my price only went up like $8 a year or something like that. And so I now have a 15-year term for 750 with a different company, but it was found through Select Quote. So go and look at that and report back. So I will send out an email again that has a post survey. Please take that. Share with me as you implement anything into your communities or as you implement these into your own lives, right? As you participate in Power Pay or as you are giving me updates as you're building your savings and investment, or as you create a will and how easy it was, or if there's questions that you have and you want to do it in your community and you want to simplify it or get more training on a specific area that we discussed, please communicate with me. I want you guys to succeed financially, and I want you to see how easy and useful it is so that you want to share these things in your communities. All right, let's see if there's any questions. By term, it's affordable and simple. Be prepared. Yeah, if you really love your family, you don't want to leave them without a will or life insurance, or a living will, or not knowing where all of your paperwork is. Not as hard to do, as expensive as I thought. You already lived through the nightmare, so yeah, don't put other people through the nightmare. Very affordable. Does NMSU offer term life? I don't know, but what I've found is that I mean, they may have like a small policy that comes with it, with like this long-term disability and term life. The cost covers maybe, I don't know, $50,000 or something like that. But you get the best rate by going and doing like Select Quote. I've never worked for anybody where I looked at their policies and they had better prices than what I got comparing across Select Quote. Sometimes your insurance company send you stuff and say, hey, you're with State Farm or Geico, we do life insurance, get it now. Those have never been cheaper. So I just go to Select Quote and get the prices, but definitely want to compare across, 3 or so different places to see what's best and most expensive, but definitely get a good reputable company that's highly rated. Yeah, so some cultures, it's not common in some cultures. That's true. But it's important, and hopefully we can start changing the attitudes and thought process regarding estate planning. And again, money in general is a taboo subject. Talking about estate planning and wills is a taboo subject. People don't like to talk about it because of the things we discussed here today. But it shouldn't be a thing to shy away from. It brings peace of mind. It allows for you to, you've worked your whole life to get to a certain point, and or again, it's not just for old people. You want to make sure that you have the decision on what happens to your children, to your possessions, etc. What happens if you're incapacitated? And so having a plan brings peace of mind. If you don't have a plan, then somebody else decides, and I don't want somebody else to decide. I want to decide. Yeah, benefits of a trust. It is done. Yes, you can have more than one power of attorney. You can specify in your powers of attorney what their roles are. So you may have somebody over part of your business, a power of attorney that does your personal financing, power of attorney that does something else. I mean, you can restrict or give whatever power you want in that power of attorney. So great. Well, you guys, thank you so much for participating today. Hopefully those are the 4 main financial webinars or trainings that I thought would be most beneficial and easiest to do experiential training on, that you guys could go and do things and see how easy it is. If there are other trainings that you think would be important or that you want to know about or think that it's relevant for the state or your county, then let me know. A lot of people have asked more about investing and retirement. And so, if there's something else you'd like me to do, let me know. But this is the 4th or the 5th, and the 5th one isn't really about personal finances. It's about evaluation and how we can be better evaluators, how to more easily use good questions, and then exciting things we're doing here on campus to make your life easier with evaluation. So thank you again, and feel free to contact me if you have other questions.